What is up everyone, welcome to my 5 mask Orgrimmar run. I went ahead and put the key info that most people are looking for up on the screen, but it will also be in the description down below, along with timestamps if you want to jump to a certain section. If I missed anything, please go ahead and ask in the comments and I'll get back to you. Let's go ahead and jump into the run.
You stand before the Black Prince.
I don't have a target.
Alright, so while entering our first zone, the Drag, we will gain the madnesses Scorched Feet and Entomophobia. If you don't know exactly what these madnesses do, I'll go ahead and throw them up on the screen. The Scorched Feet madness I use as an extra mobility tool to avoid ground effects. Entomophobia can be somewhat annoying as a caster as you can't constantly jump to keep the stacks off. So you'll want to make sure to try and jump at 3 to 4 stacks, but honestly, as you see more and more bugs appear on your screen, just jump, that way you don't have to micromanage it. As you pull this Annihilator, you'll want to make sure to avoid its Orb of Annihilation, ground effect, as it will cause sanity loss. And the Annihilator will also channel Dark Force, which will constantly push you back. You can use this to kite him back and forth in this hallway, just be careful as it can be hard to avoid the Orb of Annihilation cast if you are in melee range. Alright, so after the Annihilator is dead, go ahead and talk to Garona to progress the RP portion of the zone. In this next pack, you're going to want to target the Dominator first, and that is because it will cast a ability called Touch of the Abyss, which will actually cause you to be stunned. So you're going to want to either interrupt it or be able to burst down that mob specifically.
See if there's anyone here. Another casualty. Let's move along.
So after you clear the objective in front of Magar's Cloth Goods, there will be a hostile NPC that comes from the building named Snang. Go ahead and kill him before you pull the next trash pack, and that's just because otherwise Garona will end up fighting him by herself, and you'll just have to go back and fight him anyway because you won't be able to clear the last 2 buildings of their objectives until Garona catches up. Now this last trash pack right before the boss of the zone does have another Dominator, so go ahead and target him first, or just silence when they start to cast Touch of the Abyss.
More blocked off buildings. Check the leatherworking and engineering workshops. Careful around those explosives.
Now that you've cleared the last objective, the last thing to do is kill the boss of the zone, which is the Inquisitor. He has 2 abilities. First is Void Torrent, which launches void missiles at you. If hit, you will become stunned, launched into the air, and lose sanity. This can easily be avoided if you fight him near this tree trunk, as you're able to cast through the trunk, but the projectiles will not hit you. The other ability is called Cries of the Void, which are done at 65% and 30%. Which is a shield. If you don't break the shield, it will cause shadow damage and sanity loss. This cannot be avoided unless the shield is broken. Now that the Inquisitor is dead, we'll be moving into the Valley of Honor and gaining the Madness, Split Personality, and Haunting Shadow, which I will throw up on the screen. Now this zone is probably the one I had the biggest struggle with, and you'll be able to see why in just a bit. But before we get into that, we're going to pull Misha, which is a pretty easy elite to kill. Misha will cast Desperate Retching, which can be removed as it's a disease, and will also cast Maddening Roar, which will cause significant sanity loss if you are hit by it, but it's easy to avoid. After Misha dies, Scarabs will spawn, and this is where things start to get annoying. Pretty much all enemies up to the boss of the zone have an ability that applies Mind Toxin, and when Mind Toxin reaches 5 stats, you are then stunned for 3 seconds. With this mechanic, along with Split Personality, it can cause a major issue as you want to constantly try to move from exploding toxins, but might need to stop moving as Split Personalities spawn, and if you hit one of these, it will disorient you. So there's a lot of CC in this zone, which is why I chose to use Dubious Delight as my food for the 20% CC reduction. After Misha and the Scarabs are dead, you'll run into a pack with a Cure Bone Crusher. If this enemy gets into melee range, it can use an ability called Headbutt, which will knock your character back. The reason I think this is an issue is because if Split Personality happens to spawn as this happens, then you will be knocked back into it, causing you to become disoriented, so try to kill the Bone Crushers quickly.
I need to target something first.
As you go to cross the bridge, make note of the bodies on the ground, as they will spawn Scarabs that you'll have to deal with. I suggest that you run to the bodies to take care of the Scarabs so you don't have to deal with them when fighting the elite that is coming up.
I can't use that item yet. I require a target.
Here is an example of all bad things lining up. You can see I go to run out of the Haunting Shadow so I don't become feared, but as I do, a Split Personality spawns causing me to stop, but the fear goes off anyway, pushing me into Split Personality. I go ahead and pop a sanity orb, as the Cure Mindhunter can cause a decent amount of sanity loss depending on the timing of Toxic Volley and Split Personality. This wasn't absolutely needed, but I did this as a precaution, and I also didn't take a kebab to regen 100 sanity, and that's just because it's possible that the Haunting Shadows spawns once you go sit down to eat, and the Haunting Shadow will actually get you up and fear you, preventing you from eating and putting the kebab on cooldown. So it's best not to use a kebab in this zone or any of the zones that uses Split Personality and Haunting Shadows, as this can happen. And also note, I was below 50% sanity, and so a monster could have also spawned due to the mask effect that's on, so that is why I popped a orb. So right here, before the last boss of the zone, is another Akir Bone Crusher. I go ahead and pull the smaller adds and use a stun so I can try to take care of the smaller ones first before dealing with the Bone Crusher. What you'll want to do is avoid being headbutted like I just was, and point your back up the hill, that way you won't actually be knocked back. But as I'm fighting and avoiding the stuff I can, more unfortunate things happen, and I try to run out of my Haunting Shadow, right into my Split Personality, getting disoriented and into the fear, and losing sanity in real life and in game. Sadly, I have to pop another orb due to unfortunate events, and because this boss is fun, I do end up using a Drums of the Mountain here. Last boss of the zone is Rexxar, and there are plenty of things to keep in mind. Throughout the fight, he will call upon his 4 boars, which need to be taken out immediately as you are able to, as they cast Void Quills, causing a decent amount of sanity loss. The first 2, I silence and stun. When the last 2 come out, I use my Focusing Iris to burst them down. Also placed on the ground are 3 or so traps, and if stepped on, will cause a significant amount of sanity loss and will stun you for 4 seconds. Lastly, when Rexxar reaches 40%, he'll cast Stampeding Corruption, which will summon minions you'll have to dodge otherwise. You guessed it, you will cause more sanity loss. Luckily, my Gift of the Titans procs and I'm able to bring him down pretty quick. After Rexxar is dead, take the totem back to the beginning of the vision and head over to the next zone.
brothers and sisters in the Valley of Spirits be in danger.
Now you're going to pull the Decimator. This has two abilities, Surging Fist, which is a charge that will knock you back, just make sure you sidestep it to avoid it, and also an ability called Decimator, which launches a Void Bolt in a boomerang fashion. You can dodge this pretty easy as well, but make sure you're still out of the way when it returns.
I require a target.
Nazoth's corrupted totem.
We're going to go ahead and head into the Valley of Spirits, which is by far the easiest of all the zones. Make sure your priority target is the Void Elementals, as they are similar to the Stormwind Mage Tower ones that give you a debuff that increase shadow damage taken. Other than that, free the people for the objective from the totems and make your way to the boss of the zone. Do note that we are back to the madness of Scorched Feet and Entomophobia, so keep that in mind.
I need to target something first. I don't have a target.
Right here I end up taking a Kebab, as I know the Oblivion Elemental is extremely easy, even on 5 Mask, and with a Kebab and defeating it, I will be at max sanity going into the next zone. Just make sure to avoid the waves and pick up the Light Orb after Oblivion Elemental casts Hopelessness, and that's it.
My brothers and sisters be
Finally, we are in the last zone, Valley of Wisdom. I would put this a little bit below Valley of Honor in difficulty. The main thing here is killing all the enemies in order to get the boss to spawn. Again, we have the great combo of Split Personality and Haunting Shadows for the madnesses.
The Maghari, the evil son of Durotan, must die! The blood of the Maghar is on his hand! Their spirits demand vengeance!
I must get closer.
So right here I decide to go down the edge of this hill and pull the trash pack by the altar. This pull includes 2 Dominators, so make sure you try to CC both so you don't get stunned by the Touch of the Abyss ability. I try to get the 100 sanity from the kebab right here, but the game had other plans and spawns an enemy minion for me, putting the kebab on cooldown. It is definitely a gamble to try and use the kebab while in the state I was in, but it was worth a shot. This could have been another bad bit of sanity loss, but I was able to get out of the Haunting Shadow right at the edge. Knowing that I'm running out of time and 1 orb left, I go ahead for a big pull to speed things up. The Coagulated Horror is pretty straightforward. Don't get hit by anything it throws on the ground, and make sure to make use of the big area it's already in and kite back and forth just to make it a little bit easier. So right here I have 2 choices, use the orb or use my free death. I go ahead and use my last orb of sanity, as this elite has guaranteed sanity loss due to his ability that tosses you to an area before leaping onto you. There's no real way to avoid the toss, but you can move from the leap that causes more sanity loss. Also avoid casting when howling in pain happens, as it does silence.
No! What have they done to you?
At this moment, I get greedy and think that my split personality will despawn before the toss happens. I was wrong, and it cost me a decent amount of sanity. Always play it safe. Even though I still have my free death, I had 2 bosses to go, so it's something I shouldn't have gambled on. Now Vezok spawns as the last boss of the zone. Make sure you're not in front when Defiled Ground is cast, as it causes sanity loss and stuns you for 3 seconds. Vezok will also unleash Corruption, which spawns ads and causes sanity loss if hit. If possible, kill the ads. And lastly is Ring of Chaos, which will spawn orbs around Vezok that will once again stun and cause sanity loss. When this ability happens, try and create distance so the orbs can be dodged when pushed out.
My clan is dead, and nothing I do will ever bring them back.
After Vezok is dead, take the totem back to the beginning of the vision and make your way to Thrall. Thrall, like Illyria, inherited abilities from bosses in the previous zones. He has Cries of the Void from Inquisitor, 2 Boars from Rexar, Hopelessness from Oblivion Elemental, and Defiled Ground from Vezok, along with his regular abilities.
The elements have spoken. Azeroth is doomed.
I go ahead and take a kebab right before, as it puts me at max sanity, and start the encounter with Drums of the Mountain, making sure to take out the boars first. Other than that, this should be a pretty easy fight, and you should get your 5 mass completion.
You will drink or you will die. None can overcome his might.
take solace in the knowledge that should it ever come to
And that is it. I hope this was helpful in some way for all that are trying to get their 5 mass completion done. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you like the content and want to see more. Also, check out my socials if you'd like, and I will see you guys in the next one.